embodiment just helps people get out of their head and into their body. It's more just about reversing the order of operations. Women especially, because God, we're so programmed to be at odds with or enemies with our bodies and wanting to try to control them and get them to do all types of things. So it's more about just prioritizing the body's wisdom and then using the brilliance of the mind to carry that out, right? So we can really, in a physical felt way, not so much a mental way, learn how to trust ourselves. And we know how to connect with ourselves in a way that we could trust our feelings.
Well, hello there and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I have a very special guest today, a very close pal of mine who's been a frequent flyer on the show, Elizabeth DiAlto, known for her nuanced, inclusive, and humor-infused approach to spirituality and the healing arts. She is an embodiment specialist and a spiritual futurist. In 2013, she founded the School of Sacred Embodiment, where she's developed a range of healing and liberatory frameworks and modalities that blend together movement, energy work, and mystical wisdom. Her specialty is helping people live through what she calls the highest part of all of us, our wild soul. So Elizabeth is also a native New Yorker and Boricua and mixed European roots. Elizabeth now calls Miami home and is an avid salsa dancer and has a laugh that has been described as a sound bath of sunshine and joy. And I can attest that that is true. She literally has the best laugh in the world. And today we're talking about lots of stuff, embodiment, being activated, triggers, a whole bunch of stuff, but we're also talking about a brand new fiction book that she wrote called Dark Healing. That is truly amazing, and people are absolutely loving it. So I hope that you enjoy this interview with Elizabeth DiAlto as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I'm super excited to welcome my friend, Elizabeth DiAlto, back to the Terri Cole Show. She is a frequent flyer. Welcome back, Elizabeth.
Hi. When was the last time? I think maybe like 2019 or 17 or something.
Oh, it was a while ago, but you've been on more than once for sure.
Yes.
I know
same.
that. But there's so many, there's so many things we can talk about. We're obviously good friends in real life. Most people know that. So we talk about all this stuff anyway. But I'm really interested because I actually did not know that you were writing fiction. So I really want to hear about how, and people are loving your fiction writing. Like, it is just flying off the shelves. So tell us everything. First of all, tell us a little bit about your background for people who don't know you, about your background in embodiment. You're an embodiment expert, all the stuff that you do. And then let's move into how you went from writing self-help, kind of, to writing fiction.
So I started the School of Sacred Embodiment back in 2013. It wasn't called the School of Sacred Embodiment then. I didn't even know what I was doing then. I started out by creating a healing movement method called Wild Soul Movement, which I still teach. And I have since certified teachers in that and, traveled all over the world running retreats and workshops and stuff like that, teaching Wild Soul Movement. And then over the course of the last decade or so, just some healing frameworks have emerged for things like soul liberation, embodied self-love, body love and reverence. And I created these sub-archetypes, which I just call the wild soul archetypes, of the overarching, the wild woman archetype that many people know and love and has been popularized by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Because basically after a number of years of working with people in the wild woman, I'm like, ooh, there's little nuanced expressions of these. So I basically have just spent the last 10 years following my own, intuitive nudges, also doing some reverse engineering of my own healing processes, integrating, what's come up. And this just like you. When you create programs and you work with thousands of people, you notice the patterns emerge, right? Which allows you to create some frameworks or create some processes that tend to work really well for people as maps. Right?
Yep.
We're not telling people this is the way, the only way, or the best way, but here's a map. And then what I also love about that, because I'm such a geek for healing, and you know this too, and I know you are as well, anything that people can return to over and over again, no matter what's going on in their life, where they are, that can meet them where they are. They could hear it with different ears or, a different way of being because they've healed, they've been through other things, they've grown, they've matured, they've let things go, whatever. That's a bit about what I've been doing. And then since about the end of 2022, I've had a lot of disgust / dissatisfaction with the overlapping industries of online entrepreneurship, self-help, personal development, spirituality, and stuff like that. And, when I started doing embodiment work 10 years ago, it wasn't a buzzword like it is now. It's everywhere now. And, the internet, social media and stuff like that is saturated with these things. And being kind of an OG, seeing how things have evolved, it's not my fave. I don't have any shade to throw at people for doing what they're doing. I personally just do not enjoy it the way that I used to, even though I love my work, my community, all that stuff. And so I was just looking for something to derive a bit more joy from that I could have, that kind of fresh enthusiasm for. And I love reading. I've always loved reading since I was little. I love fiction. So I thought it would be fun to start weaving in, stories and things, again, from my personal life, from people I know, from clients, from men I've dated, into these stories that are based on a lot of real stuff, but it's fiction. So we could push edges, go deeper in certain shadowy things and, mystical priestessy healing things in a harmless way.
But in an effective way. Because what the feedback has been really phenomenal on what people are getting out of. And the name of, I know you're writing more, but the name of this book is Dark Healing. Just for people who want it. And where can people buy it? People who are interested?
I'm self-publishing everything on Amazon. Great. I know people have feelings about Amazon, but when you're an indie author, there's only so many options. And that one is just the easiest way to get things out in the world. So that's where I'm starting. Yep.
So what is the feedback you've been getting on Dark Healing from people? Because I've been reading a bunch of stuff where people are like, wow, this really woke something up in me. There was the last thing that I read said that.
It was what I'm getting, because the book, it's about an order of secret priestesses in New York City who are healing men, right? And no, do I advocate for women in real life going on missions to heal men? No, I really don't. Especially through like sexual healing and using plant medicine and stuff like that. And don't worry, for the people for whom consent is important, just like it is to me. There's a whole ritual of connecting with the soul to make sure there's consent. Even though it's not an overt conversation, but again, this is why we do fiction. The themes, right? Like the different types of men for a lot of us are archetypes that we have encountered over the course of our dating and romantic relationship lives for those who date men. Themes related to boundaries, family history stuff, women coming into their own, trusting themselves, saying no, being able to walk away from things, being, sensitive or having gifts and navigating what it's like to be in a world where, you might be sensitive or have gifts or, you're into energy and you could feel things and what that's like. So people are really relating on so many levels. And the other really fun thing for me as a multiracial woman who, the aspect of my heritage that's always been the most kind of significant and alive for me is being Puerto Rican. It's very much, 80% of the characters are New Yorker, Puerto Rican, or Dominican women. They're like people I would want to hang out with in real life. And a lot of the readers are saying that as well. So especially for my Latina readers, they're loving. There's a little bit of Spanglish in there. And it just feels, because even when I read things, a lot of the fiction I like that is more like leans towards like the magical or the mysterious. Yeah. You also have to encounter like werewolves and vampires and like shapeshifters. I'm like, can we get some like real human beings? But it's like a little bit of magical realism. People do have powers. There's some inexplicable things. And people, that's what people are really, they're connecting to the characters. It's almost like, did you watch Sex and the City back in the day?
I gotta say I did not, but I know about it because I read all the trades. I know.
Right. So, you know how people would be like, I'm a Charlotte, I'm a Samantha, or everyone would have their favorite. People are having their favorite priestess from my book. Like, I love Rosie or I'm an Elena. And
I love
that brings me a lot of joy. But it's also just, it's an escape read for people, right? Ultimately, if anyone's getting anything personal out of it, which is always possible through stories, that's great. But it's also like acknowledging people are escaping anyway. We binge on TV, Netflix, whatever. People still love books and fiction and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like my work, right? It straddles different genres. And so that's something like a lot of the reviews have been like, oh, finally, like a book about like priestessy women who were still like real and like living a life I can relate to.
Yep. Oh my God, I love it. All right, let's talk a little bit about embodiment, because as much as you are from this world and you've been doing this for a very long time and long before it became, like you said, popular, I feel like we're like the old OGs of what we've been doing. Now everyone's talking about mental health and boundaries, and everyone's talking about embodiment, which is great. I mean, again, like you said, you know, I'm not anti, there's no shade to be thrown, but I also think that there's something valuable about continuing the conversation about embodiment. So let's say for people in my audience who are not familiar with what embodiment work is about, can you talk a little bit about what it is and how you came to it?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I call my work the School of Sacred Embodiment because I'm a mystic. So everything I do is always going to be integrating the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. There's plenty of embodiment work that doesn't bring in the spiritual component and is much more rooted in somatics and more specifically and explicitly about regulating the nervous system and stuff like that. For me, it's always been more about connecting to things by synthesizing different modalities, like using mantras, slow sensual movement, like you might encounter in a slow flow yoga class. Or if you've ever gone to like pole dancing or any kind of erotic movement class, usually the kind of warm up, because this is not a workout. For years, I've been saying it's like a work in for your spirit. Right. And I know, you know, you're connected to people and the original founder of Intensati, Patricia Moreno, when she was with us. And that's a workout, right? You are working out and sweating through the body with mantras. This isn't even really like exercise. It's a way, it's using movement to connect with yourself. There's a lot of self-touch and affection, some gentle stretching, movement, circling, because what I really wanted women to do when I originally started this, and my background was in fitness. And I was going through this transition to just want to be able to talk about a broader range of things and speak on more healing things. I had also started in 2012 getting, you know, my Reiki attunements and learning about energy work and getting into more mental and emotional mindset, healing type of stuff. And I just really wanted to integrate all of it. And I'm also a Virgo, so I love when things are efficient. And so my specific flavor of embodiment work really synthesizes things so that people can have practices to turn to. What I've loved over the years is the people who are more scientifically oriented and want to know why things work. They send me articles and podcast things all the time like, wow, wild soul movement really does all this. I'm like, I know, I just don't talk about that part, you know? Like, I'm geeky, I'm mystically geeky. I'm not scientifically geeky, but I am aware. Because again, used to be a personal trainer, biomechanics. I love all that stuff. I have studied the nervous system. And it's also important if you're doing anything in the body that could trigger people in any way that you be trauma informed. So it's all of those things. But embodiment, one of the things I've been saying for years is it just helps people get out of their head and into their body. But I always like to also follow that up with, and there's nothing wrong with the head, right? Because, you know, people are like, we got to destroy the ego. And then like, listen, for us, it's more just about reversing the order of operations because most people, and women especially, because God, we're so programmed to be at odds with or enemies with our bodies and wanting to try to control them and get them to do all types of things. So it's more about just prioritizing the body's wisdom, that like intuitive, brilliant information that's always coming through us, through our bodies, and then using the brilliance of the mind to carry that out, right? So we can really, in a physical felt way, not so much a mental way, learn how to trust ourselves. And once you trust yourself, that kind of handles a lot of trusting other issues because you know how you feel in the presence of somebody. So it doesn't even matter if what they're saying is true or what, like all these things that we get mentally distracted about. It's like, we know how we feel. And we know how to connect with ourselves in a way that we could trust our feelings. Because as we know, you know, not all feelings are facts, right? Lots of times they're responses to things, but it doesn't mean there isn't some little nugget of information in there that's useful or valuable that should be considered when, you know, moving forward, making decisions, engaging with people, interacting, whatever.
Totally. It's funny that you say that. It's like I've been talking about with my mastermind and teaching about, being activated. And I was writing about this in the book that's coming out in October about when we get activated. I don't call it being triggered as much because that, to me as a
Yes.
therapist, it always indicates like a past traumatic event. And being activated, what it means to me is that my response is being driven by something more than the interaction I'm having. But it
Yes.
doesn't mean the interaction I'm having isn't problematic potentially, right? So these things don't negate each other, right? Just
Yep.
because I get activated, this
Yeah.
person may be being a total jerk. That's real too. It's understanding. So back to what you were saying about trusting our feelings, knowing our feelings, knowing that we can trust our feelings. This is why it's so important to understand what are the things that activate us and why, and
Yes.
and create space for that. Be like, oh, because a lot of times with my therapy clients and even in my groups, people sort of the same way they want to eradicate the ego, they want to eradicate triggers. They want to eradicate. I'm like, listen,
No.
it's not the way human beings are built. We're not going to eradicate shit, probably. But what we can do is be sensitive. I always talk about the fact that I had an emotionally unavailable, father, emotionally neglectful, not there, basically. So I can be activated by anything that's a father-daughter sweet something, right? Will always create a pain, a thought. That doesn't mean something's wrong, right? I've done all the work.
Right.
I've healed all my I've talked
Yes.
it out. By the end of his life, we had a
Yes.
great relationship. But
Yes.
I will be forever. There'll be an indentation on my biology
Yes.
and my psychology and my emotional life based on my childhood experiences. And yet I don't try to change that. I just, in compassionate form, am sweet to myself about it. Like, oh yeah, that does make you teary. Oh,
Yes.
why? Now it's integrated into the tapestry of my friggin' life, not something to
Mm-hmm.
be like cut off or gotten rid of. You know what I mean?
Okay. I love how you said this, that you emphasize this. I do as well, because in the world of like Insta therapy and TikTok psychology,
Yeah.
so many words have been diluted, right? Like, not everyone is a narcissist. Not everyone is gaslighting you, and not everything is a trigger,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I remember I was actually sitting here at this table where I'm sitting right now with a friend. She was like, "Oh, I wonder why that triggers you." I'm like, "It doesn't trigger me. I just don't like it."
You're like,
I'm
let's get
allowed to
clear.
not like things. That's not for me. It doesn't have to be, because then, and this is what's amazing. I wrote something down while you were talking, because here's also the other thing. Just because I don't get activated also doesn't mean that something's okay.
Correct.
It actually just means that I'm neutral with it now, but that's where it is. Just mentally, I know, like, yeah, that's just not, I don't roll with that
Right.
anymore. I'll give you an example. In this Mercury retrograde, you know how they'll often be like, people from your past will reach back
Uh-huh.
out. 5 men, five, Terri, have
No.
like been up in my text messages or DMing me, but one man in particular who I had to block, unfortunately, like 6 or 8 months ago, tried to call me from a different phone number, and then even resorted to like messaging me on my Facebook business page and emailing my customer service
No.
email.
Stop.
Now, listen, I don't think he realized that it wasn't coming right to me. I
Mhm.
don't think he realized that it was going to go to other people.
Oh, no.
But either way, like, I'm not acting like, you see, I'm like laughing about it. I'm not triggered. I'm not activated. I was just ignoring all of his other messages.
Mhm.
But once he messaged the team, I unblocked him for a second just to be like, hey, my team saw those messages, which is very embarrassing and inappropriate. Please stop contacting me. And then I reblocked him. And it was just like, it's like a blip. It's a thing that happens
Mhm.
and you address it and move on. But it's not
Right.
it's not a big deal. It's also not, for the people that are more energetically oriented or into things like the law of attraction,
Mhm.
I'm also not attracting this. Like,
Right.
if anything, it might be a little test to be like, are you going to respond? Are you going to ignore it? And
Mhm.
like, maybe, but I'm also not like there's a million reasons why people do things
Yep.
that isn't just always because like we're calling it in, you know?
There's a simplistic angle to that. And I used to, back in the day when I first got diagnosed with cancer in my early 30s, and I was really into the law of attraction then, and I was, The Secret had come out, and I was losing like everybody else around it. And people, and even then, I knew people being like, everything in your life is happening for you. It's all, all the stuff about us attracting it. And people would say, well, if you believe in the law of attraction, do you think you gave yourself cancer? And I would be like, well, I can hope not, because if I did, I don't know how I did it. I'd like to not do it again if that's possible. Could someone tell me the mechanics of that?
Oh, I know.
And it's interesting what I was going to say before about circling back to the activation trigger conversation. One of my pals, Dr. Shafali, and I were doing something together, and she said something that really hit me about triggers. And she said, anything that triggers you is 100% you. She's like, your triggers are inside of you, right? Again, not meaning that the person might not be acting like an idiot, but if you're actually triggered, and she's like, and that's a good thing, because it means that you can also learn to manage your reactions, your response. You can learn to understand why that's triggering. This is why I created the 3 Qs, right? For clarity, we ask the questions. Who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? How or why is this behavioral dynamic? How we're interacting? How is that familiar? This is like a shortcut to understanding where am I having a transference here to someone? And this is all the self-work that I feel like is so valuable. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing online and a lot of what's out there, there's both, right? So I'm not generalizing, but
no, there's plenty of great stuff.
There's plenty of great stuff. But the focus and the thing that the stuff that is the most popular, like if I were to look at the stuff that I put out there, the stuff that's most popular in my blogs would be the ones where I'm like, is your mother a narcissist?
I know. People love having like diagnostic resources.
And to be able to basically, in a way, pointing out. Now, people do have parents who are narcissists, right? People do have these experiences, and it doesn't mean they're not real. But I always try to balance between honestly touching on what the person might have experienced, and then hopefully moving into how can we become empowered in our adult lives now? I want to go back to something that you were talking about with empowerment, though, because I'd sent one of my clients to your work because she had said to me, and this was a long time ago, actually, and I don't think you and I have ever even talked about it, but her experience of her body was that it was an appendage that she had to drag around with her. And I was like, okay, I don't know much about embodiment work, but I'm pretty sure you need not to feel like your body is an appendage, right? Like that was such a depressing description. And I said, just go to her Instagram where you were actually doing movement and whatever. And she really got into it. And I really noticed a shift in her experience of herself, of her body, of her presence, because that's really what you teach and really what we're talking about.
The other thing I love about it is, so I was just recently on a pilgrimage in Egypt, and I had the opportunity to teach Wild Soul Movement to the group of women I was with twice. And the first time I just volunteered because we were on this Nile cruise boat that had this beautiful upper deck. There's a video of this on my Instagram. And I was just like, I would love to teach up there. Because if you're a person who's a facilitator, whether you run retreats, you teach movement or whatever it is, sometimes there's just a space you see and you're like, I must do something here. It's so amazing. And so when I saw that open, amazing space, I'm like, what could be more sacred than this? And it was cool to teach to women who were all new to me and let them just have a felt experience. Because the other thing about embodiment work is it helps you to literally move through things and process things without having to talk about it. And we love therapy. We love being able to articulate things and see and understand and recognize patterns. But sometimes we can only talk about things so much. And we let things move. And one of the women, she was saying, she's like, I feel so sexy. And I'm like, wow, this is me. And I'm like, yes, exactly. And the thing is, the goal of it is not to feel sexy, but what a great byproduct,
Sure.
right? And to feel in your own body, like turned on and alive and beautiful and attractive or whatever. And all you did was move while saying a mantra, or there was a playlist, and it wasn't for anyone. There were no mirrors. It wasn't a performance. Your eyes were probably closed half the time. And you literally just it's kind of like when you have a great meditation and then you're like, woof, wow.
Right.
I feel like 20 minutes later, I'm like a different human being, right? When we add movement into that for so many reasons, it just gives people a different experience of themselves. And particularly for women, I always like to say of like the miracle of inhabiting a woman's body, the pleasure of your own existence. And you know me, I'm also pretty obsessed with inclusivity. So the way I teach, and I teach my teachers to teach, there's always cues, right? For people, if you have an injury or something going on with different parts of your body, if you can't do a particular thing, it feels so inviting to take care of yourself and do something different than what we're asking you to if you need to. Doesn't feel othering. And you don't ever have to like advocate for yourself in our class because we see you. We teach in a way that there will always be an option. You don't even have to say it, which that's feedback I've also gotten over the years, especially from my people with chronic stuff like fibromyalgia or other like autoimmune stuff, being like, this is the only place. And every once in a while, someone will be like, the exact moment my arms started to hurt, you said something like, and if your arms are hurting because you've been holding them up for too long, just let them go. Remember, like, take care of yourself. And she's like, I started crying because often in classes, I'm looking around and everyone else is just doing it and I can't. And, you know, there's also something to that experience of honoring that our bodies are all so different. And we might be going through things or having experiences. And, you know, as I've gotten older and I've matured, my audience kind of comes along with me. So I'll have occasionally like some younger people, but for the most part, we're like 35 plus, like I'm over 40 now. And we've always had amazing people in their like 50s and 60s, couple of women in their 70s. One of my teachers I trained last year is 71 years old now, which I love so much. And there's something also, I think, to the multi-generationalness of it, the women from all over the world, different cultures. Like, there's just something about connecting through movement and our bodies that doesn't have anything to do with like beauty or weight loss or fitness. We're just being. We're just getting to a place of being.
If people are interested, though, in having this experience, is there places on your website? Can people join things? Is there stuff people can do?
Yeah, there's actually a lot. Things are more organized now ever since I really focused on organizing everything into being a school. So we have 4 main courses, and they all have wild soul movement practices and healing meditations and journaling prompts and stuff like that in it. So depending on if people like the archetypes or that body love and reverence, which I try not to play favorites, but that's for people, especially who have struggled with their body. The body love and reverence work is really beautiful. Embodied self-love, and then the original, the wild soul liberation framework, which, you know, I've been teaching that for a decade now, which covers the themes of surrender, release, trust, receptivity, wild dreaming, desire, love, and truth. But then once a month, I do a Sunday session, which is just a free, I'm in my living room, you're in your living room, we do it. And then the recordings for those go into, I have a membership. That's just my workshops from over the years and all of those Sunday session recordings. So just simple stuff. Everything's accessible. Because that was something over the years. It used to be like you had to come to an in-person thing. And then, you know, if you're passing through Miami, I'm teaching a class or 2 a month in Miami as well.
You are?
Yeah, it's fun. Because when I was in Egypt, I'm like, man, I miss doing this. It's so easy to do things online. I really miss being with people in person. And since the pandemic, I just haven't done as much in-person stuff.
Yeah. And
I got to get back into it.
I think that's true for everyone, though. It's so interesting just thinking about, like, I did my whole, book launch online, and now I'm planning my next book launch, and I'm like, am I really traveling to all these places? Like, maybe, but I also like this yellow chair quite a bit, and
I know.
being home on Crackpot Farm and being with my dog and my husband, it's like we are used to pandemic life a little bit. I wanted to say one last thing, or ask you one last question, which is, well, first of all, and people, again, you guys, for where you can get the book, go to Amazon. You're going to love it if you are into anything. Dark Healing is what it's called, by Elizabeth DiAlto. You don't want to miss it. All right. Moving on.
It's actually, I have a pen name. I have a pen name for the book. Oh. It's Maddie Saul X Divina. It's okay.
Okay.
But the easiest thing too, though, is just untameyourself.com/links.
Oh, yeah.
Literally everything.
All right. My last question for you. Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle, and how did you overcome it, if you have?
Oh, well, you already know.
Yes, I do.
I have parents who are boundary bulldozers.
Yep.
No, wait, boundary destroyers. Excuse me. Actually, more accurately, one of my parents is a boundary bulldozer, but they're working on it. I got them to go to therapy. They're working on it and they're doing better. And I have a parent who used to be a boundary destroyer. So it was really, the challenge was at a certain point, especially with a boundary destroyer, what to even bother. Like for me, it became a self-boundary because there was no point in setting a boundary with that person because, again, they would just destroy it. Yep. So it was like, cool, I actually have to adjust my own boundaries around what I even share and engage with that person. And again, they are finally, after 11 years of asking, got into therapy. I had to do a little period of no contact, but we are reconnecting, and I'm really proud of them. But that's really what it was. It was realizing I have people in my life who, I would like to have in my life. It creates a lot of discord with, my brother and his family too, to not be in contact with my parents. Yeah. So what boundaries do I even need to have with how I even engage with them?
Right.
So that I can even have even a mild connection.
Yep. It's amazing though how, because I've known you the whole time you've been on this journey, and how the amount of love that you have for them and them for you, but that you come back to the table. And that the fact that there's, and you had very clear boundaries in coming back to the table this time, but the fact that they're willing to do it too. So there's something really beautiful about, even when it's hard, healing can happen, change can happen. But again, you holding firm to your boundaries is the thing that created the opening for it to happen.
100%, because it was not happening literally for 11 years. Then I was like, I have literally not to threaten, but just, again, another, almost like an imminent boundary will be, I will not talk to you.
Right.
If you can't step up and do your own work and do your part.
Yep.
And they pushed and they pushed. And finally I was like, okay, I told you this was a possibility and here we are. And it was about 8 months of not talking to them, which was, really, really, really hard for them.
Yep.
And it was obviously hard for me too, but that was a boundary I had to hold because nothing was ever going to change.
Right. Oh, no.
And I was unwilling to continue on the way things were.
Yep.
And so it was brutal, and it wasn't to be punishing or anything like that, but it changed everything.
Yep. And it's self-protection. I mean, listen, there comes a point where you're like, this can't be only about you. This is also about me and my mental wellness. And this is not good for my mental health. And so you made changes to make it be okay for your mental health. And actually the joy of being reconnected and being able to be together as a family and all of those things. But there has to be, the boundaries have to be respected. So I really give you so much credit for doing it, because it's not for the faint at heart.
Yo, that's an understatement.
You're not kidding. All right. Well, thank you.
You are not playing.
Thank you for coming. I love you.
Love you too.
See ya.